Rain lashed against the metal domes of the Miksari slave market, where neon signs flickered like broken promises in the drizzle. The air smelled of oil, wet sand, and something far more bitter, defeat. Inside a narrow holding pen, a figure hunched motionless beneath a threadbare blanket. The others avoided her, even in chains. The market clerks called her Unit 7R, but that wasn't her name. It had been Rin'tari. She didn't remember who had first owned her. Somewhere in the years of being sold, broken, discarded, and sold again, her memories had faded like old ink. Her face, once proud with lavender skin and crystalline irises, was now dull and smeared with grease. No one looked at her twice anymore, except when haggling to use her as manual labor. She was what the traders whispered about, a bioengineered failure. Sold for pennies. Worthless. That morning, her latest owner, a squat Rin'tari merchant with jaundiced eyes, grunted and scanned her chip. He was done with her. Won't even sell for scrap, he muttered, tossing her chain toward the pen guard. Rin'tari expected the usual. A trash barge. Disposal. Maybe another auction where the crowd just laughed. But something different happened. A new voice echoed from behind the guard. I'll take her. She looked up sharply. That voice. It wasn't grating like the aliens she'd known. It was deep. Calm. Human. The guard chuckled. You serious? She's defective. Barely stands. Can't speak your tongue. Just protocol mimicry. The human stepped into the light. He wore a rough gray flight jacket, patched with burn marks and stains. Dark stubble, worn boots, and eyes that didn't mock, just observed. I'll take her anyway. I'll pay in credits. The Rin'tari merchant perked up. 500. 10. The human replied flatly. 50. 15. Take it or she rots. And just like that, the chain was handed over. She didn't understand why. No one did that. No one wanted the ones sold for pennies. They bought slaves that still glowed, still bowed. This human didn't even check her stats. He just helped her to her feet and muttered, "Come on, let's get out of this stink." They walked out of the market like shadows leaving a bad memory. Her legs trembled with every step. Her body was bruised and thin, but her mind raced. Why? What did he want? What game was this? He didn't take her to a ship full of shackles. Instead, he led her through the rain toward a squat, worn-down vessel tucked in the backport. A Corellian cutter she recognized. Ancient human tech. Probably barely flew. He helped her inside, sat her down, and without a word, offered her water. Clean water. You got a name? He asked, sitting across from her. She stared. Couldn't speak. Her throat ached. She tried to mouth something. It's okay, he said gently. I'm Adam. She stared at him. The name meant nothing, but the way he said it, like she mattered enough to be spoken to, not commanded. Over the next days, she learned his rhythms. Adam wasn't rich. He was a salvage hauler, barely keeping his license, running odd recovery jobs on derelict moons and abandoned wrecks. He gave her space, food, rest, never touched her, never asked for anything. On the fourth day, she managed to croak, Rin'tari. He looked up from an engine panel and smiled. Nice to meet you, Rin. She blinked. Rin. No one had shortened her name before. Like it was worth remembering. But it wasn't paradise. Her mind was still shackled. She flinched when engines roared. She shrunk when lights turned red. One night, a system alarm blared, and she curled into the corner, trembling. Adam shut it off and knelt beside her. Hey, you're safe. I promise. He never asked what she'd been through. Never demanded her story. But he listened when she spoke. And over time she did. He learned about the factory that built her caste, engineered for servant duty. About the noble who discarded her for spilling wine. About the merchant who liked to strike her for fun. About the other humans she'd seen, cold soldiers, pirate lords, buyers with hollow eyes. Adam just said, they don't speak for us all. It wasn't until week 3 that she saw the moment he changed. They were scavenging a derelict freighter, drifting in orbit over a ruined mining world. Standard salvage job. She followed him inside the broken halls, using a scanner to trace power signatures. But they weren't alone. A rival crew of Nick's scavvers, brutal insectoid raiders, ambushed them. Adam pushed her behind a crate as stinger blasters hissed. Stay down, he shouted. She watched as he ducked, rolled, fired back with his pulse rifle. 1 against 4. He took a hit to the shoulder, another to his side. But he kept moving, protecting her. She grabbed a wrench from a broken console and did the unthinkable. She attacked. Striking the nearest nicks in the joint, she disarmed it, kicked its blade away, then shielded Adam as he dragged them both behind bulkhead cover. After the raiders fled, bleeding and humiliated, she sat beside Adam, panting. "You didn't run," he whispered. "You didn't throw me away," she whispered back. He chuckled. "Guess we're even." And for the first time since she could remember, Rin'tari laughed. Not a dry mimicry. A real laugh. But as she helped patch his wound, a deep fear lingered inside her. If someone as good as Adam could care for her, what would the galaxy do to stop that? The stars outside the viewport shimmered, silent witnesses to a fate rewritten. Her fate, and it had only just begun. Rin'tari stood at the viewport of the cutter, arms crossed, staring out at the distant blue glow of Rin'tari Prime. It was supposed to be a simple drop and go. Offload salvaged reactor cores, collect the creds, and refuel. But as she watched the planet spin slowly below, her gut twisted. Something felt wrong. Adam had gone down alone to negotiate. She'd volunteered, but he insisted she rest. "I trust you to keep the ship warm," he'd said, winking. But hours had passed. No signal. No updates. Her fingers tapped the railing as she weighed her options. She wasn't the same fragile being who once flinched at every noise. The fire Adam had ignited in her. The belief that she was more than property burned hotter now. She slid into the co-pilot's seat, flipped on the comms panel, and scanned for frequencies. Nothing. Something had happened. She bolted toward the gear locker and grabbed a stunner, her old instincts kicking in. But this time they weren't born of fear. They were forged in loyalty. The landing zone was eerily quiet. The docking bay lights flickered, and smoke curled from a nearby vendor's stall. Rin moved swiftly, blending into the shadows. Adam's last transmission came from a warehouse near the fuel depot. She crept toward it, footsteps silent on the steel floor. Inside, a dozen armored guards surrounded Adam, who was down on one knee, blood staining his sleeve. A tall merchant, scaled and gold-eyed, stood with his arms crossed. "You thought you could undercut my price on salvaged cores?" the alien snarled. "Humans. Always arrogant. You got paid fair," Adam said through gritted teeth. "This isn't about creds. You're running something else here. Illegal." The merchant hissed. "You know too much." Rin stepped from the shadows, raising her stunner. "Let him go." The guards turned, stunned not by the weapon, but by who held it. To them, she was nothing. A former slave. Broken. "You again," the merchant sneered. "You're trash. Trash stands. Trash shoots. Trash fights back," she snapped. The stunner fired. One guard dropped. Then chaos erupted. Adam lunged up, using the distraction to slam his elbow into another attacker. Rin ducked a blade, rolled, and grabbed a fallen pulse pistol. She'd never fired one before. Her hands shook, but she pulled the trigger anyway. 2 more went down. She and Adam moved as one, covering each other, making their way toward the exit. They didn't look like warrior elites, but desperation had its own power. Outside, Adam stumbled. She caught him. "You came for me," he murmured, bleeding heavily. "Always," she whispered, pressing his side. They made it back to the cutter. The moment the hatch sealed, she jammed the throttle. Engines screamed. The ship tore from the surface, heat searing its underbelly. As they broke atmosphere, Rin gritted her teeth. That wasn't just a crooked deal. That place was a front. Adam nodded weakly. "Weapons. Smuggling. Slaves. They're expanding." Rin's jaw tightened. "Then we shut them down." Adam blinked at her. "You sure? That means war." She turned to him, eyes blazing. "I was sold for nothing. Treated like dirt. I'm done hiding. I'm done being afraid. You gave me a reason to live, Adam. I'm not losing it now." He smiled, even in pain. "Then we'll fight. Together." They spent the next week gathering intel. Adam's contacts, old salvagers, rogue AI nodes, exiled rebels, fed them scraps of data. The merchant wasn't just a petty thug. He was a broker for the Marn Collective, a shadow network trafficking living beings across sectors. Rin pored over files, learning layouts, guard patterns, even internal routes inside the slave processing facility. Every time she saw a photo of another being in chains, Xeric children, Rin'tari females, humans, her fists clenched. They weren't just fighting for themselves anymore. "If we breach this section," Rin said, pointing to a cargo schematic, "we can disable the energy dampeners. The cells will open. We give them a chance." Adam leaned over her shoulder. "You sure you're ready?" She looked him dead in the eye. "I was born in a vat. Sold a dozen times. But I've never lived until now. He nodded. Then let's go make some noise. Infiltrating the facility was suicide. They used a maintenance tunnel to bypass security, hacking a bypass node to enter unnoticed. Rin, dressed in a cloak, led the way through narrow ducts. Adam followed, his wound healing but slow. They dropped into a service bay. The air was thick with humidity and the hum of containment fields. Rin spotted the generator, glowing red, linked to a series of control towers. That's it, she whispered. One overload, and the whole network crashes. Adam handed her the charge. Then make it count. She slipped across the floor, planting the charge just as a patrol rounded the corner. The guard shouted. Rin sprinted back, hit the detonator, and the world went white. Containment fields exploded in sparks. Alarms blared. Prison doors hissed open. Dozens of captives spilled into the corridors. Move, Adam shouted. Follow the beacon. They led the captives through chaos, smoke and fire painting the walls. The gold-eyed merchant appeared, roaring in fury. He charged Rin. She didn't run. She met him head-on. He struck with brute force, but she moved faster, ducking, slamming a knee into his gut. He reeled. You called me trash, she said, grabbing a steel pipe. Now watch trash take you down. With a final blow, she cracked the pipe across his head. He fell, and the roar of fleeing captives filled the air. As they escaped to the cutter, Adam bleeding again but smiling, Rin turned back to the smoke and ruin. That wasn't fear in her chest. It was purpose, and she was just getting started. The cutter limped through the Curus drift, smoke trailing behind it like a dying comet. Emergency lights bathed the cockpit in a pulsing red glow. Adam slumped in the pilot's seat, pale but conscious, while Rin'tari hovered over the console, rerouting power away from non-essential systems. Her hands moved with instinct born not from programming, but experience. Life support stable, she muttered. Shields holding at 12%. Hull integrity questionable. Adam coughed and smiled weakly. Just like old times. She turned, eyes hard. You almost died. Again. And you didn't run. Again. He tried to chuckle, but winced in pain. Rin knelt beside him, reapplying the gel compress to his ribs. We got the captives out. But the Marn Collective isn't going to just take the loss. They'll hunt us. Adam nodded. They've already put a price on us. Double for you. Her jaw clenched. Good. Let them come. They couldn't fight the whole collective alone. Not with a half-broken ship and no army. But Rin had a plan. Not just escape. Not just sabotage. She wanted to burn the Marn to the ground. The war began not with a fleet, but a whisper. A signal. Encrypted and broadcast across shadow relays, rogue pirate satellites, and forgotten militia bands. To all who've been enslaved, betrayed, or sold, the message read. There's a human and an ex-slave who just broke a Marn processing station wide open. They need help. Rin's face was in the footage, fierce, defiant, victorious. The galaxy took notice. Within days, trickles of support began to flood in. Smugglers offered crates of weapons. A retired AI warbarge named Symphony pledged its firepower. A hacker cult from Teleris V hijacked a Marn transport grid, rerouting entire shipments. Adam watched it all, stunned. You started something, Rin. She stared at the flickering star map. No, we did. Their final target was the heart of Marn's operation, Station Varkas, a mobile fortress orbiting the dead moon of Ilnur. It processed thousands, buying, selling, and reconditioning living beings for profit. Breaking it would send a message that echoed across empires. They had one shot. The plan was suicidal. Rin, Adam, and a coalition of ex-slaves, rogue mercs, and AI drones would assault the station from 3 vectors. Rin would lead the infiltration team inside. Adam would fly point in the cutter, drawing fire and disabling the external turrets. The night before the assault, they sat on the cargo ramp, looking out at the stars. Adam broke the silence. You scared? Rin didn't answer right away. No, I was scared my whole life. Scared of being sold again. Of being alone. But not now. He looked at her. Why not? Because I finally know what I'm fighting for. He reached into his jacket and handed her something. A small, rusted locket. Inside was a hollow of a young girl. My sister, Adam said. Taken by slavers when we were kids. Never found her. Rin clutched it. We'll find them. All of them. The assault began with chaos. Explosions rocked Varkas Station's outer hull as the symphony pounded it with plasma barrages. Adam wove through enemy fire, diving and looping, keeping the turrets off Rin's path. Rin's team breached the lower docking ring. Gunfire erupted in every corridor. Slavers screamed. Her pulse raced, but her steps never faltered. They reached the control core. Hundreds of prisoners were locked in energy cells. The guards tried to activate the dampeners, but Rin was faster. She slammed a charge into the primary node and detonated it. Sparks flew. The cells opened. Thousands of beings poured out, confused but free. And rising behind them, rage. The rage of the forgotten, of the broken, of those sold for pennies. The station became a war zone. But not all went well. Adam's cutter was hit. Badly. It spiraled and clipped a docking strut, crashing into the hangar deck. Rin saw the smoke. Her heart seized. She broke from her team, sprinting through the burning corridor, ignoring calls to stop. She found him slumped against the wall, blood pooling beneath him. No. No, no, no. He opened one eye. You again. She laughed through tears. Always. Together, they activated the overload codes. The prison block began self-destructing. Not to kill, but to erase. To end the entire system of bondage. Forever. They escaped in a stolen scout pod, just as Station Varkas collapsed into itself, a supernova of justice. Months later, Rin'tari stood before a gathered crowd on Zerna Prime. Her lavender skin glowed with health, eyes sharp with purpose. Adam stood beside her, arm in a sling, grinning like a proud idiot. Behind them stood thousands of survivors, freed beings who had taken up tools, built homes, created schools, and started anew. Rin raised her voice. I was sold for pennies, treated like dirt. The galaxy said I was worthless. But someone saw value. Someone gave me the chance to stand. She looked at Adam, and I learned that our past does not define our worth. What we fight for does. Applause thundered through the square. Later that night, as the stars shone overhead, Adam sat beside her again. Do you ever miss the old life? He asked. She shook her head. No, because I finally have one worth living. He smiled. And one worth fighting for? She took his hand. Always.